You're in. I can't hear you.
Hey y'all, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, cool. I'm not sure why I'm not able to turn on my camera, but looking into it.
Hello, Maya. What is it saying on your I guess your computer for your video?
It just has the video icon is grayed out, so I can't click on
All right. So what browser are you on?
Chrome.
Chrome. And are you on a Mac or PC?
PC.
Okay. So do me a favor and actually just go to the tech booth if you don't mind.
Okay.
Just go back out to sessions and go to the tech booth, and I'll try to get you situated.
Got it. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, can you hear now? Perfect. I can't.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay, perfect. Amy, I should tell you, I'm moving. Our movers came early, and so I'm out on the patio. Not will sound it is because we have movers in our house unexpectedly early, and so I've been taking all my meetings out here today. But I hope that won't affect the audio. I'll just mute myself.
Yeah, you sound good right now. Good old AirPods.
Thank God for them.
Zach, we can't hear or see you. Can you click the thing that says share audio and video? Oh, really? Potentially go to the session for tech support, and there we can wait a few minutes. Hopefully we can figure it out. Hi all, welcome. We're just getting started. We're having a little bit of tech issues, so I'll probably get started in about 3 to 4 minutes.
Zach, Jessica answered my email in about seconds. So if you are having issues, it might be worth emailing her as well. She helped me immediately when I was trying to make sure I needed anything this morning.
Okay, great. Welcome, y'all.
I can't hear you. It looks like you're not yet a panelist through the link.
Zach, I would suggest checking out the tech support session if possible.
Yeah, and if you're not using Chrome, Firefox, it might be worth switching to that. I wonder if there's a launching problem. I'm obviously not tech support.
Aaron, I can't see your video anymore.
Oh, you can't? How strange. Let's see. I can still see me.
Okay.
And it's still on. Let me try turning it off and on again. Am I there now?
Yes, you are.
Perfect.
Zach, I got a link to sign up for the session as a speaker, but I'm not sure exactly. I don't know how to do it myself.
It looks like we have someone joining. There we go.
Hey y'all, I was able to work it out. Thanks to
Oh,
the
good.
amazing tech team.
Great. Hopefully we can get Zach in here and we will hit the ground running.
Yeah. And Amy, if you want to go ahead and get started, waffle on about the Climate Collaborative started or climate in 2020, 2021.
Start with intros since Zach has already met you. So he already has seen that part. So that would be wonderful, Aaron, if you could start us off with intros.
Sure. Well, hi, everyone. I hope you're making it today and staying safe and healthy. It's really lovely to be able to connect with people virtually. I'm appreciating that all the more, absent being able to be in person. So thank you guys for having us for this an important talk today. I'm Erin Callahan. I'm the director of the Climate Collaborative. We're a nonprofit that works with about 700 companies in the food and agriculture sector. And we take a sector-focused approach, recognizing that it's easier, a lot more fun, and a lot more effective if companies work together around common climate challenges. So we support companies in taking collaborative action on issues like packaging, regenerative agriculture, transportation, food waste, and more. It's just been incredible growth and interest and innovation and experimentation and kind of solutions building that's happened over the past few years. And I'm sure we'll dig into that, but there's just been, and I think that we're seeing climate is a priority in ways that we never have before. So even though there's so many things pulling at our attention, from COVID to the economy to everything else, it's incredible to see this on climate. So excited to have this chat today.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Maya, can you please introduce yourself and tell us about your world?
Yeah, of course. Hey y'all, thank you so much for having me. My name is Maya Guevara. I am from East Austin and still living in East Austin, so very proud to be from Austin. I wear a lot of hats and do a lot of many things. Currently, I am actually the assistant farm manager with FarmShare Austin. I know that a couple of my colleagues at FarmShare have presented and are presenting at this conference in different panels. That organization works on food access, land access, and also training for new farmers. And so I was part of their farmer starter program in the fall. And so I just graduated from their program, and I'm now working at the organization. And I'm also an organizer and the community garden manager for a local collective called Veggie Mijas. Actually, we're a chapter of a national collective, but Veggie Mijas Austin chapter, we're a people of color collective building community around food and justice with a vegan and plant-based focus. So we actually really started as just a group of vegans, vegetarians, and folks interested in plant-based lifestyles in Austin who happen to be people of color, kind of feeling a little bit left out of kind of the mainstream ways that we talk about veganism, especially here in Austin. And so we wanted to get together and share food and share recipes and build community. And so we actually started the group in the fall of 2019. So it's been, a little over a year, and one of those years was COVID. Right, exactly. So yeah, really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And it looks like we got Zachary just in time. Zach, are you there? Can you hear us? Maybe we need a couple more minutes. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Amy Stedman. I'm the co-founder and COO at Future Proof Brands. We're an alcohol beverage company. I'm also one of the co-founders of the Austin chapter of the Naturally Network. So Naturally Austin, we're a big group of food, beverage, and other natural product companies that are all trying to grow in a more ethical way. So with more social and environmental responsibility. I come to this topic because I'm originally from the Middle East and have felt the climate crisis near and dear in my own family. And, just seeing the themes of this conference and the COVID-19 pandemic and the food crisis that's resulted, we know that the climate crisis is here. And so we kind of see this as the next big food crisis that we all need to be preparing for. And so I wanted to invite a really awesome group of folks to come speak with us today from different sectors. So we have Zach from the city to talk about the climate equity plan of Austin, Maya from the community of growers and community organizers that are really passionate about this, and then Aaron representing a group of businesses that are all focused in this area. So really interesting panel, and I'm glad that you can join us today. Zachary, are you there? Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Awesome. Would you mind please introducing yourself for our guests?
Yeah, sure. I'm Zach Baumer. I work for the city of Austin. I'm the climate program manager. So I manage all things related to mitigation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and climate adaptation at the city. I'm in our Office of Sustainability, so our food policy manager, Edwin Marty, who many of you have probably seen or heard, he's sort of my parallel that focuses just on food stuff. So food and climate is kind of where these things connect, and we've done a lot of connecting over the last couple years with our climate planning efforts.
All right, so to start off our panel today, I'd just love to hear about y'all's world in 2020 and what all was going on and what actually, as a result of the pandemic, affected what you were already working on with your various areas. Zachary, if we can start with you on that one.
Yeah. Well, for me, we had started in the fall of 2019 this full revision process to our community climate plan. So we had engaged like 140 people. We had done trainings. We had set up advisory groups, a steering committee. And in January, February, we were full steam ahead. Like we were moving. We had all these people in the city organization and the community engaged in revising this plan. And then just overnight, the whole thing went virtual. So in a way, I mean, we were very lucky that we had already forged all these relationships and already started this process. And doing a planning process where it's a lot of meetings and it's a lot of conversation and research, it actually worked pretty well to switch it over to virtual. The parts of the plan and parts of creating a plan where you're trying to meet new people and engage new voices and new connections in a planning effort, that was really hard to do. But I mean, I think we also found that like a lot of people were sitting at home and were free, and it's kind of easier to just jump on a webinar and see or learn about something as compared to like a lot of the times in the city world, it's like, we're gonna have a meeting on Thursday at 6 p.m. at this library on the north side. We hope you come.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work very well. So actually like getting good at doing things virtually and getting good at like getting people to show up to virtual events like was a very important part of this. And our food team jumped into all sorts of work related to resilience, resilience of the food system in emergency feeding and getting people, and that's kind of a whole other story.
Yeah, so it sounds like even though, of course, there were so many challenges, the nature of everything going virtual actually made organizing for climate almost like a new opportunity to get people engaged that weren't previously engaged.
Yeah.
Maya, did you have that same experience knowing that y'all had just kind of started with it?
Yeah, it was definitely different. Some different and some the same. I think, first of all, I want to give a huge shout out to the Office of Sustainability and the Climate Equity Plan. In the beginning of 2020, I was actually working for the city of Austin in a different department doing community engagement. And so I really learned from the community engagement specialists at the Office of Sustainability and the work that they were doing with the community on that, on all the co-creation and like really deep intentional community engagement. So just want to put that out there. And for us, just starting out and, this group that we were building, kind of like I mentioned in the beginning, we were a group of folks really trying to build an intentional community in another way. And we did that in the beginning through, having a lot of potlucks, sharing food, sharing space. And that was super important for us when we first started in the fall of 2019. We had all of these grand ideas for justice work that we wanted to start doing and things we wanted to start getting involved in the city. And our folks, our members actually kind of told us, hey, we're pretty burnt out. Like a lot of us are community organizers, we're working a couple of jobs or, we're just kind of existing as people of color in Austin, which is actually like its whole own just exhausting, kind of state of existence, right? And so we like really heard that and we took that and we said, okay, we're really going to focus on this time of base building and, doing that through potlucks and all of these things that, when COVID hit, there wasn't really an alternative to doing them in person and sharing that space in person. We kind of put out feelers and folks were like, even in April, we're like, we have Zoom fatigue, like we can't be on any more Zoom meetings, we're doing it all day for work and then we're doing it, all of these things. And so we really had to put kind of a pause on and just really rethink what we were doing. I mean, the other piece of it is that a lot of our base was actively fighting all of the systemic stuff that was going on and that is going on and that was exacerbated by the pandemic. So, a lot of our folks didn't necessarily have all of their basic needs met and, we're fighting around, we're being involved in city processes of trying to get, more equitable access to COVID testing and, we're fighting against, the harm that policing has always caused in our communities, but it was exacerbated and brought to the forefront, right? And especially in Austin, there was a lot of our folks that were involved in that movement. And so we really kind of recognized that and switched to making sure that, our folks are taken care of. And some of that's just more one-on-one care work, connecting people with mutual aid and solidarity movements that sprung up during COVID. But the other piece of that we were able to grow is we were able to actually start our community garden project. So it's something that we wanted to do for a while, and that, you know, I always wanted to do with the Jimmy House coming in. But we found, like Zach said, that, you know, some folks actually did have more time, and people had this renewed sense of, oh my gosh, you know, things are very precarious. We are so distant from the food that we eat, many of us, and we want to actually learn how to grow food, and we want to be more connected to the food system locally. And so we were able to start our community garden project, and we just started really small with a couple of plots in an existing community garden. But that was one of the things that we were really able to, you know, have collaboration with different organizations like Rooted in Melanin locally, and kind of get that work started.
So it sounds like, you know, anticipating with the climate crisis, you know, we have to anticipate the human element, right? Like that people are gonna be tired when crisis is hitting, and you know, we need to kind of respond and flex with our organizing methods accordingly, and try to plan as much as possible before things hit, right? So that we can account for that as well. Thanks for sharing. Aaron, I'd love to hear more about you. I mean, it was not just the pandemic year, but also the election year in your world. Oops, I've lost your video again on my end. I'm sorry.
Oh, you have? Here, let me try. Let's see. Am I here again? Hopefully I'm here again. Can you see me?
Unfortunately.
I can see you, Aaron.
Oh, okay.
Oh, well, that's
Go ahead. I'm sorry about that.
good. Yeah, no, yeah, it was here. And I mean, reflect Maya and Amy, what you guys just said. I mean, I think one, it's incredible how many hats you both wear, and two, hear how much you've accomplished over the past year. It's a real feat, and it's very energizing to hear all the incredible work everyone else is doing. I find these conversations really motivating. But yeah, and I think, Maya, to one of the points you were just making, I mean, I don't believe in silver linings for a year like last year. There was too much pain and trauma and tragedy across so many elements of our society. But I think one takeaway coming out of it that we can't ignore is that I feel like it did break down some silos. And, you know, everyone was kind of looking at climate and the environment is like this thing over here that they, and racial justice and equity as this thing over here they were dealing with, and like health is this over here they were dealing with, and they were all these separate silos. And I feel like last year blasted those silos to pieces and made us realize, like, wait, no, this stuff is all interconnected. We keep pretending like we can address them one without addressing the other. And I think when it comes to climate change, there was a little bit of catharsis in that, feeling like, oh, people, like, we finally get this, and we can now help companies get it. This is one of our core project areas this year, and it's really exciting to see that kind of information uptake, connection being made. So, but yes, I mean, just to kind of go back in early 2020, you know, we saw climate kind of taking more priority across companies and government, and it just felt like there was real momentum kind of globally, and then a national level from companies. Just felt like really something was taking root. The youth justice movement. And then COVID hit, and I think, you know, honestly, as a person running a very small climate nonprofit who like realizes how little time we have to address climate, it was terrifying, because it was like, you know, the economy came to a halt. Food companies were completely just trying to meet demand and keep food supply chains running. Climate was, I was, you know, thinking, oh God, climate's going to become secondary to everything. And the most incredible part of the year was that just was not true at all. Companies, more than ever, I saw people last year wanting to be part of bigger efforts themselves, wanting to change in action and be part of collective efforts to drive that change. And so, you know, recognizing that so many of our companies were going to have all their supply chain projects on hold, projects on hold, we launched this big policy effort, recognizing the COVID and recovery is this huge opportunity to support climate action. So we did a bunch of training and helped companies get activated to talk to policymakers about ways to drive policy inclusion, climate, and COVID stimulus. And I have December, we saw that was successful. The bailout and stimulus bill passed in late December was one of the largest climate bills ever passed. And so, you know, there was real progress on the climate front, and I think, you know, this year already we're seeing more of that. So, you know, last year was a mixed bag, but I think I'm kind of relentlessly optimistic when I look at how much motivation and responsibility I see people I work with taking to kind of be part of the solution to the problems that now persist. So yeah, it's a year of change.
Absolutely. And, we just had the inauguration last week. I'd love for you to just open up our next question, but just talking more about your work and plans for this year and what the opportunities are in front of us right now.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I mean, just today, executive orders passed banning oil and gas drilling on federal lands, conserving 30% of federal lands by 30. It feels kind of the wind is at our backs for the first time for too long on climate. It's one of the top priorities of the current administration. That's all great. But I think, what I would just say is that there's a lot of other priorities too. We're in the middle of an economic crisis and a health crisis. And so I would say for every business or person, it's really important to stay activated because climate for a very long time has become very comfortable as a sort of backseat agenda item that gets shoved back and back. And I think we just don't have time for that anymore. I'm in California, and the wildfire season last year was another tragedy of the year. It was awful. Right. And that's become an annual occurrence. And so, we all have to be thinking about how we show up to keep climate as a top priority. And I would say for companies, it's not just your supply chain, but advocating at a state and federal level and talking to your consumers, getting them to care. I mean, I think the thing is we need everyone to care. There's this statistic that showed recently. One, if you frame it the right way, 90% of Americans want to in clean energy. This is a hugely popular kind of policy agenda. And the reason why people don't, why we don't see more change is that people aren't asking people to change enough. We aren't actually just making enough of a. So, there's a real opportunity here, and I think it's exciting to have the wind at our backs for the first time in a decade at least. Yeah.
So it seems like I'm hearing you say that, framing the issue to be in line with issues like the economy, like when Biden says, when I think climate, I think jobs, and framing it the right way to go along with, hey, climate justice is racial justice as well. And that's top of mind for a lot of people at this moment, to just kind of continue on that momentum on all of these issues integrated together.
In the food system, it's been really cool to see how things have been framed up in executive orders, but in framing up the agriculture policy, both justice and climate, and looking at the justice executive orders that were signed yesterday, climate was included, justice was included. Like, I think it's so important to keep nodding to the other kind of intersections with all of these things in the framing. Yeah.
So I'll take it to you next, Maya. On those topics, what are your plans with your community for 2021 with vaccines coming? Are you guys taking advantage of this new wind of behind our sails moment from a policy perspective? Maya,
sorry. Yes, delay in unmuting myself. Obviously things still feel so precarious that it's a little bit hard to plan. I know that we're all kind of experiencing that right now. I am actually sitting with a Zora Neale Hurston quote. I was listening to the podcast Green Dreamer this morning while I was driving to the farm. An interview with Dr. Chelsea Frazier, who was talking about environmentalism through the lens of Black feminism, and she shared the quote, the Zora Neale Hurston quote, "The dream is the truth," and that really resonated with me in thinking about the dreams that we have for our local food systems, for our communities, really, really locally, because sometimes I know for myself and for many of the folks that I'm organizing with, the national policy work just feels we feel very distant from it at times, right? And it feels, I think distant is maybe the best word there. So we are definitely dreaming. We're dreaming of alternative economies, locally based on solidarity and mutual aid. Veggie Mias is we just kind of started entering the process to work towards becoming a worker-owned co-op, so that we can invest in some of those alternatives and kind of take some of these dreams. And we're already a collective, but formalizing it and working on those things. That'll be a years-long process, but we're just entering that and figuring out how we can move together in those ways. We definitely we are really focused and committed to building local food sovereignty and self-determination, and figuring out what that looks like. And so hopefully this worker-owned co-op model is just one of the things, but also we are just wanting to invest more in mutual aid locally, because that's really what has gotten us through this time, is mutual aid efforts that have popped up and really acting in solidarity with each other. And so making that sustainable is really top priority for us. Definitely more collaboration that we're looking in for 2021. Really hoping to grow the community garden project. Like I said, we started very small.
Yep.
And we didn't know how much interest we would have, and it turns out we have a lot of interest, and people are really invested and really excited, not only about growing food, being outside and for their own mental health. I've had people tell me, I'm just inside like all day, I never leave, and this is the one time that I come outside and actually get to put my hands in the earth, and it's so healing to rebuild that relationship with soil and earth and food. But our members are now saying, hey, like, what are we going to do with this food? Like, actually wanting to think about the food production aspect of it, and seeing how we can also channel the food that we're growing back into the mutual aid and back into community are some of our biggest themes. And then also just, for right now, figuring out how to do community building and placemaking digitally. Right now we're working on a zine project, a digital zine project that people can contribute to around. Our theme is warmth and care, kind of coming out of this winter that was even more isolating than winter is already an isolating season, right? But saying, hey, people of color in Austin, we want to know what kept you warm this winter, in mind, body, and spirit, and just figuring out ways to get creative and do some of that work digitally.
That's awesome. I love that campaign. I don't know where Zach went to. I lost him on my side. Can you guys see Zach? Or
No, he disappeared for me too.
Okay. Well, Maya, I'd like to hear more about those mutual aid examples that you mentioned, and just to go deeper on that. Can you give us some examples of programs that came up that were beneficial during the crisis, so that we can think more about how we can perhaps prepare some of those programs preemptively for our own communities around the world?
I think there's a few locally that really come to mind. The first would be Communities of Color United, CCU. The full name is Communities of Color United for Racial Justice, if you want to look them up, but they go by CCU. And CCU launched a mutual aid project at the beginning of the pandemic, both cash mutual aid and then also food. And so, and they're, all volunteer organizers, just really working like really locally with the groups, with the families they directly know and that are directly impacted. And that they have actually, they fundraise so much money to be able to directly redistribute on a monthly basis to families. So between the cash and the food, I think they're able to have a sustainable model and help people meet their basic needs. Another one would be some of the local groups that have been serving specifically people experiencing homelessness. So Street Forum ATX is one of my favorites. Twice a week they're in Republic Square Park, which is downtown for those who aren't necessarily from Austin, but basically they're in a few local parks, like really building relationships with people who are living on the street or living in their car, and serving mostly, serving food, bringing warm things, socks, and anything you would need for the winter to stay warm. But also they really prioritize building community and sharing space and conversation with people experiencing homelessness. And another one is the 401 Federation. They have a program called the Allyship for white allies who are interested in supporting reparations. So they actually have a reparations gardening program where they'll actually come to your house and install a community garden plot, and then you take care of it, and then the food is donated for mutual aid. And then they also, the allies, the white allies, pay a monthly donation, which goes directly to reparations to support the Black revolutionary organizers that are organizing with their organization. So those are kind of 3 different models that I've seen that I've been inspired by this year.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing on those. Erin, what kind of unique partnerships and organizing have you been doing behind the scenes to get people aligned around these policy initiatives and other kinds of partnerships and models that you've seen be successful to help businesses through times of crisis?
Yeah. Well, building on my point of like the strength of what you can do locally, that is kind of what our model is based around. I know I've talked a lot about all the federal advocacy, but I think for, when we're trying to help companies look at their footprint, we kind of look at, okay, what within your operations and supply chain do you have control over versus influence over? Like you can control the light bulbs that you have and whether you get renewable power or, coal-fired power in a lot of cities. But you can't always control for where your suppliers get their power or, this, but you can influence them through incentives, through conversations, through all sorts of mechanisms. And so I think it comes to kind of, looking at that approach to like, where can you have control and where can you have influence? That's kind of what we apply to our whole model. So first, there's this kind of aspect of when you look at the kind of natural products industry where we're focused, it's a group of companies that tend to have a really strong will to act. They tend to be innovators and experimenters and kind of wanting to upend the food system. And they kind of exist on the fringes and really are willing to kind of try a lot of new stuff. And so our model is kind of based around making that a really fun, easy club to join and then creating enabling factors for companies to work together around the things they can control while trying to influence the system. There's a lot of things wrong with how we grow food in the United States, both kind of structurally and through policies that kind of make that the case. But at a local level, at a regional level, and at a kind of company value chain level, there's so much companies can do. And so when you look at things like regenerative agriculture, that's kind of a really cool example of a set of practices that have been around for thousands of years. So many of these practices are grounded in just how indigenous people have grown food for millennia. But is now, thankfully, we just forgot how to grow food for a few decades in the 20th century. And we're kind of learning again, and that experimentation is happening at the fringes. And it's not out of altruism, even though it's a thing to do, it's because topsoil is degrading across the world, and we need to address that. And so you have companies kind of working to create models that are replicable of how we actually create just sustainable food systems that aren't just sustainable. They don't just kind of sustain themselves over time, but regenerate, actually leave the earth better than we found it. And there's so much interesting science happening. And because these companies have the ability to experiment, they're kind of helping define new practices across the food sector. So, companies like Dr. Bronner's and General Mills, who created the organic certification system, have been doing these practices for a while. But now you see Cargill, General Mills, both make around regenerative agriculture, and you start to see those practices cascade across the food system. So, I would say that we try to look at where can you have control over changing things for the better in a way that can then replicate and scale beyond the kind of little laboratory of companies that we've created. And that really is how we look at the kind of change factor for what we can do. We want to create as many virtuous circles as possible to make this the easy way to act. And that won't always be the case on climate, but where it is, we should definitely be doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been my experience being a member of the Climate Collaborative, just as a member company. You guys are always reaching out about policy initiatives and getting the groups of companies together. And that's certainly what we try to do at Naturally Austin as well, is just say, hey, what can we do as entrepreneurs or people with small businesses get together and have that much larger of a voice? Erin, last time we were on the phone together, we were speaking with Laura Hawkins, who's a local grower here in Austin, and a community member, was going to be on our panel with us, unfortunately couldn't join. But one of the things that she mentioned would be helpful for growers facing the climate crisis would be to establish layers of support that go beyond the city or municipal level because so many of the growers are in rural areas. They're not privy to the access that may be more available if they were in Austin proper or something like that. Is there anything that y'all are doing with these big CPG companies or even medium-sized CPG companies in their supply chain that would provide that level of support, or any ideas for how to keep finding solutions there for every level of the supply chain?
Yeah, absolutely. I lost your audio for a second, but I think I got the whole question.
Sorry about that.
Please just let me know. I think I think it's my internet, but I think it was around kind of how we create, the biggest challenge of agriculture isn't that enough companies don't think it's the solution. It's that it's really hard to give farmers enough financial support and incentives, and also allow farmers to learn from each other. Not companies telling farmers what to do, when farmers are the ones who know their land best, their crops best, how to grow best, kind of relying on things that really take into account those factors. So I think there's a lot of interesting financing mechanisms. The state of California initiative, which provides direct state support to farmers as part of California's cap and trade program, so that farmers can get access to technical support. And efforts. General Mills is an interesting one because they do have their 1 million acre commitment. They've actually supported local watershed efforts and kind of existing the farmers where there are farmers, build on the kind of relationships within those networks to then support deeper action and financial support and incentives like that. So those are a couple of things. It is starting to rain, so I'm going to move undercover temporarily. I will turn off my video.
All right, take care, Erin. Yeah, so just my experience running my alcohol beverage company, we are currently trying to get our B Corp certification. And so we have been doing this process where we analyze how much water we take out of the water system, what is our carbon use, how are we going to address this? And it's been a really interesting process because it started all of these conversations with the supply chain, like Erin was mentioning, and just trying to figure out how we can incentivize our folks that we work with to be true climate neutral partners, and kind of speaking more to that, what can I influence if I can't control it in my own supply chain? So just wanted to reflect back on that experience. It's very top of mind for me because I literally had my meeting about that this week. So.
Amy, I'm sorry. So to everyone on the call, I'm moving today, and so I'm outside. I'm dealing with California rain, so this is a real pandemic channel. But just to build on the point, maybe there's one other thing to say is that we have to make these models financially viable, because, like with the organic that ultimately enables farmers to make more money based on shifting toward practices that are better for the food that we grow as well. And we have to get to that point with farming and regenerative agriculture too. So there's a lot happening around how we make sure that farmers are getting to see the benefits of these practices, but I don't think we're there yet. So right now it is a lot of company investment and a lot of investment, in some cases state government investment. But there's also people looking at, can we around this, like how do we make level 4 at the farm level? I'm just really grateful that there are so many people curious about that question, because it's definitely something to, and I just add, in Texas on the ranching side, when it comes to ranching, there really are a lot of proof return on investment for ranchers switching to things like rotational grazing and other regenerative practices that actually can pretty quickly turn around for those farmers at very low capital investment costs. So there's a series of videos called Soil Cowboys. But some of them are in Texas, some of them are in my home state of Mississippi. So I'm just grateful that there's a lot happening there, and I think we're kind of in the middle of the journey rather than at the end of it. But it's a really important question of how to pay for this and how do we make sure.
Right. And I'm seeing some questions in the chat as well of working in food and waste, surplus recovery. Convincing businesses to reduce and repurpose potential food waste is difficult. What are obstacles or reasons why and how we should address this? Is there anything you could speak to on that, Erin, from a food waste perspective, what businesses are doing? And Maya, feel free to chime in on any of these questions.
Yeah, I would point Refed as launching a new food waste roadmap for use. You know, we've worked with them before. They're kind of one of the big food waste nonprofits in the US. And it's real tragic because when you look at the food system and waste, one of the biggest contributor emissions in the food system is 40% of all food gets wasted. It never gets eaten. Whether it's in all of our trash cans at the end of the week, or it's in restaurants, leftover food plate, or it's food that wasn't harvested when it was grown for various reasons. And I think at the beginning of the pandemic, I was struck with those images in the New York Times of like food being tilled back in soil instead of harvested, and gallons poured out, and it was just tragic. One of the things to just note is that our to be pretty resilient this year. Like most can find most things at the grocery store still, despite one of the biggest demands that we've ever seen in any of our lifetimes. And so there's a lot to acknowledge there, but so much work to do less on waste. And I think, one of the things that we try to do is get companies to focus more on waste prevention than just diversion from landfill. A lot of big companies are on diversion and just like saying, oh, we're not going to send it to landfill, we're going to do all these other things with it. Like, let's divert in the first place. Like, let's be really efficient with how we use resources. And there's a lot of creative ways that retailers can do that. Grocery stores have a huge kind of interesting part of the kind of supply chain role in this. So we've guide for retailers to use, and it looks at it from like, how do you forecast what you order? How do you manage your inventory? Talk to consumers about how to preserve their avocado once they use half of it so that the rest of it doesn't go black on the counter for the next. So there's a ton to mine there, but it's a really important point.
Yeah, absolutely. And how much do you invest in that, right? And actually put dollars towards that education process behind it to solve the problem. And I just want to
the
go
good
back
thing is it's a huge money. I mean, I'm sorry, but like this is such an easy solution because it's like it's throwing away money in addition to food. Like for companies who are profit driven, like it makes so much sense. So yes, right. Totally agree.
Yeah, for sure. And then, Maya, I just want to take it back to you in terms of that, that investment. We've got a question in the chat here to talk about the decommodification of food instead of making good food more expensive. And I know you were kind of talking about that mutual aid of food and those alternative economies being part of a resilient community. When you have an economic crisis, we can't always rely on the economic system to deliver our needs, right? So I'd love to hear more about your thoughts there.
Definitely. Hi to Abby, that's my coworker. She always asks very difficult questions. So I was like, I don't have the answer to that. But I think that it's also something that I've been thinking about a lot, right? And I just feel like the key there is that we have to really invest in the people that are growing our food and invest in farmers and figure out, that's why I said alternative economies, because what we're working with right now, it's almost hard to see how that's a possibility, right? But it's really inspiring to see both nationally and locally how folks are able to do that work. And when I talk about food sovereignty project, that's also part of what I'm talking about, of being able to have reciprocal relationships between growers and consumers. And because currently the farmers and the folks that are growing the food, both, I mean, there's so many levels to it that the farmer in the middle is really squeezed and maybe doesn't feel like they have a lot of agency over the prices, right, and things like that. And I'm certainly not an expert on that, but that's part of what makes it so challenging. And so I think that anything that we're able to do, from helping new farmers get land access, and I know that's work really. Some of the most exciting work that I'm seeing locally is around talking about what could it look like to invest in agrarian land trusts and help think about other ways of land besides just our traditional ways of land ownership, but helping farmers access land and just investing financially and in other ways in the folks that are growing the food, I think is really, really key towards decommodifying the food and combining that with the mutual aid, making sure that farmers have the resources also to be really invested and connected in their local communities and not simply shipping food outside of our communities, but we're actually able to find those creative ways to be more connected in the way that we're serving the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking about this food rescue opportunity mixed with this mutual aid opportunity, mixed with this sort of cultural opportunity that's in front of us to reconnect with our food and with our growers, and to invest in them as part of our community and not just something that we pay for to get cheap food or whatever it is. Any more questions from the audience for the last 15 minutes? Maya, I love your point of view. Challenge traditional ways that people think about farming and food. So that's great.
I mean, I think one of the things, if there's, it looks like there is another question. Otherwise, I had a question for you. Looks like there's one.
Go ahead, Erin.
Okay, well, I just think one of the things we're really focused on, you kind of work with so many kind of people directly in the community at a community level. And I think one of the things we're always trying to do is be like, how do you change behavior? Because we're very aware that in the natural products industry, we have a pretty bought-in consumer base, not completely, but a lot of them are already very progressive, very supportive, these kind of points that we're trying to engage them on. And there's a lot left to do, but we also want to have a expanding group. Really interested to hear of like, what do those conversations look like? How do you actually reach people and have conversations to help bring voices? And I think probably a lot of that has happened naturally this year, but it must have been so interesting to launch all of this like in a pandemic year when already you can't have ways of engagement as normal. And yeah, it's a really interesting and it matters so much that we aren't just preaching to the choir, but like congregation as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, it has to do with a couple of things for me. First of all, I think sometimes we need to reframe how we're talking about, for example, just talking about these issues in general. And for example, climate change. For Veggie Mijas, we never talk about just climate change because we understand that that's not, it doesn't exist on its own in its own silo. It's connected, like I said before, to all of these other systems. And actually, the way we talk about it tends to be, that, hey, the systems that are harming our communities directly and are harming us in all of these ways are, through like labor exploitation, through policing, like I talked about, and surveillance, through health. Those are the same systems that are harming the environment and the land. And actually, in many of our ancestral traditions, we understand that we're actually not separate from the environment and we're not separate from the land, just in the same way that we're not separate from each other. And I think that, for many folks, like we don't really need to be taught that, but sometimes we need to kind of remember that because it is those ancestral ways were taken from us, right? Through like a lot of violence but this idea of not being separate and in the community organizing tradition that I was trained in, we would always use the phrase in Lakesh, which is Nahuatl, and it means in Spanish, tú eres mi otro yo, or in English, you are my other me. And so really like reframing it that way and saying, hey, the fact that on the east side of Austin, we ride way more public transportation than anywhere else in Austin, right? Like we are environmentalists, we save our food and we save, our Tupperware, like our butter container. And, we're already doing these things. I think sometimes when we talk about environmentalism, we use all of these big words and not realizing that our communities are actually already practicing this, right? And we don't need to rely on shaming people and saying, you need to recycle, if you're not eating vegan, then like you're not doing it right? But kind of understanding just all the relationships, the systems, like I said, like we're riding the bus so much more, but on our side of town, we don't have the same infrastructure that allows us to actually access, the bus and the transportation system. And like that's tied in with with climate change. And so I think sometimes when we just talk about climate change, it just pushes people out because we say, hey, like, we know that's important, but also like we have a million other things. And like I said in the beginning, our basic needs aren't met. And so I think meeting people where they are in some of those ways are just some of the things that I've been thinking about lately with regards to that.
Yeah. Like, we just need to involve everything, or it's not even evolving, because it's like what you're saying, like it's what it used to be like. So it's really just returning back to our old practices as humans, but just evolving our economy to not just take into account, you know, specific numbers and that be that all that we're focused on as people. So I mean, for me and my business, that looks like, you know, the B Corp model or whatever. It's taking into account these social, environmental, you know, factors into the business model. And we're saying, hey, we're not just this type of company. We're actually this new type of entity. It's just interesting to see those models. I don't think it's a perfect model. But it's, you know, something. It's something that we can move forward to. And I just think in all of our careers right now, it is the work we need to do. Like, our parents' generation didn't truly realize the climate crisis for what it is. And our generation of able-bodied, you know, working adults literally has the job of converting this economy to make sense for everybody that lives on this planet from both a practical and spiritual level, right? Like, it's not just that, you know, we are separated from nature, from a, you know, supply chain perspective, and from that perspective, but it's also part of our experience as humans and spiritual beings as well, right? Like, this is our home and our planet. We need to take care of it I mean, it would be a dream for every human to be born, for that to be a great thing for planet Earth, you know, like that's the dream, right? So how could we as a generation push this forward as much as we can for the next generation?
Yeah, I really love that. And there's a question about behavior change approaches in the chat, and I think Maya, you just touched on a lot of those too, and that really collaborative approach too, because I think, to what you were just saying, Amy, like sometimes climate change can be viewed as this like almost punishment of like, oh, we have to like pay more cars, and we have to like think so much about what waste we put our like our disposable packages and boxes in. Like, it can be like a burden. And I think reframing it, you know, we use a lot of kind of tenets of behavioral psychology. There's this great climate communication that we work with, and he's always saying you have to make it easy, fun, and simple to be part of for people. Like, make it a club people want to join. And I think the fact is, like, climate change, climate action is something to race toward for so many reasons. Like, it's full of opportunity, but also like it's not something, you know, fear doesn't drive action, hope does. And I think we saw that over the last 4 years, and especially over the last year, as we just kind of all sat in our houses staring out the window. But we all need something to that's bigger than ourselves, that matters, and that will ultimately create more opportunity. And I think that's why so many companies in this industry are innovators. Like, they're going to be on the winning side of it. Like, it's nice to be on the winning side of creating a system that functions better. And that is an exciting thing, not a punishing thing. And so I think that aspect of all of this is something we're constantly as well. And the fact is, they were study, like, when it comes back, we do work with companies that are profit driven. Just an NYU study that there, it's like the percentage of customers willing to pay produce product has grown 7-fold over the past couple of years. Like, it's people are paying so much attention, and you know, it's on us to kind of figure out give them something to do. And certainly that's what we're trying to do with companies, is make it really easy to make the right decision. So I think behavioral psychology, we've kind of learned data doesn't change people's minds, like the heart does, and kind of that. So yeah.
And I'm just really excited in the shift in the topic about it, of putting it on consumers and putting it on individuals, when it's just absolutely unrealistic. Like, business, and government, and big community groups are, you know, these are the ways that we're actually going to have change sometime in the next 10 years, which is when we need it, or sooner, you know. So it's very frustrating to see people, you know, being shamed for, you know, like we're saying, not not driving a Tesla or eating Beyond Beef when it's so much bigger than that. And we need to be facing issues at work and in government, not just in our shopping carts or whatever.
Yeah. And there's this youth, one of the prominent youth climate activists in the US, Jamie Margolin, she's always saying, like, shut up about the straws. Like, it's not the straws, it's the big oil and gas companies. That point is so powerful. Like, we don't need to get lost in self-victimizing our own behavior. Like, we have to push for systems change. And so it's exciting to see companies do that and exciting to see the systems make steps. But yeah, I couldn't say amen to that enough.
Yeah, well, just to wrap up our panel here, I'd really love just to focus on, you know, the purpose of this conference is to share these great ideas and models so that we can all have more resilient communities at home. You know, what are those things that we can adopt from what you guys have done and experienced this year and last year? You know, what can we do in our own communities moving forward for 2021, knowing the opportunities in front of us, knowing this integrated approach is so important. Maya, I'll take it to you first.
I'm sorry, I was distracted by the, by the chat. Can you repeat the question just so briefly?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, chat is going off, which is great. Just talking about, you know, the purpose of this conference is really to build that network of people that want to organize around these issues and move it forward. And so I would really love for those key takeaways from your experience. You know, what can people be doing in any community, you know, from my hometown in Syria to, you know, Austin, Texas, and anywhere else in the world to try and organize relevant groups to keep moving forward. Just love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that probably my biggest takeaway is, you know, all of this is so overwhelming and so global and so, you know, it can feel, there can just be so much despair tied up in it. And I just want people to know that, like, we're all feeling that. And also, I encourage people to just look into the organizations doing the work, whether it's across the world or, you know, in your hometown, and really try to find that hope, find folks that are doing good work and reach out and connect. I think that, you know, one thing is that now that all of our meetings and everything is virtual, like, we can be more interconnected with folks doing the work in other places, but the action is local, right? So reach out to your neighbors, reach out to your friends, you know, start making those connections, meet people where they're at. And when it comes to the business community, because I don't often have the privilege to actually be in these conversations with folks working more on the business side, you know, I always just encourage, you know, direct investment, that there's already people on the ground and doing this grassroots work. And oftentimes we just don't have access to the capital and the connections and quite frankly, just the money to really make this big of an impact. So I always, you know, encourage like direct cash investment and just investment in any way possible in the local grassroots organizations that have been doing this work for quite some time.
Developing those circles of support for those local organizations. All right, thank you so much. Erin.
I'll be fast. Have a minute. Well, firstly, second everything Maya just said. I think that's all super important. And I would say never become just kind of recycling and feeling like that's enough. I think it is really important to get engaged at the local community level. If you're kind of paying attention to the products you buy, pay attention to what they're doing on climate, ask the companies you buy from, be an informed consumer where you can, and ask people what they're doing and advocacy work on it. Ask yourself at the local, state, and national level. Like, it's really important to have a voice and to make representatives know that you care, to make sure that the people you're purchasing from know that you care, and to make sure that everyone climate is top of mind and top priority for you. And then, like Maya said, support these efforts wherever you can, because I don't think there's any environmental organization that has enough resources and support. So yeah, thank you guys. But I'm curious, and for being part of this matters a ton. So thank you for even spending an hour of your day with us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you joining and the patience through all the technical difficulties, but this was a really awesome conversation, and I hope we can turn this into a blog post and get this content out there for more people interested in organizing around this area. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.